What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 92 of the Steam Deck Podcast, Slipscreen Games' weekly gaming podcast, all about Valve's portable PC powerhouse, the Steam Deck. I'm your host, Peter Messi, joined, as always, my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Max Wright.
Ahoy, ahoy.
Full steam ahead, my friend. What's going on?
Full steam ahead. I'm okay. I'm sort of, I think I'm recovered from Summer Games Fest now. Waiting for that Nintendo Direct. I can't believe that video game news is now over for the year. But hey, let's see if we can scrape the barrel and find something to talk about this week.
I'll tell you what, though, like I know you're joking a little bit, but even if there is no more news, I'm just like, man, at least there's like releases to look forward to and
Yeah,
talk about, right? Like it's like it was slim pickings those first couple months. It's been a dry winter.
I've been fine. I've had a lot to play. I'm having a break now, but I look forward to sort of diving in next week with some Elden Ring and just sort of then from there, I'm sure I'll just nosedive back into some games.
Yeah, we got plenty to look forward to in the next couple
We
weeks.
do, we do.
So, the one of the things that I don't think Valve has been looking forward to is the
Mhm.
fallout of the, ongoing story about, their lawsuit in the UK. So, of course, this is something that came out a couple weeks ago, months ago now, that there was a lawsuit about Valve, being sued for, let's see, it was 656 million pounds or $843 million if you're in the US over claims that it uses Steam's dominance in the PC gaming marketplace to shut out competition and overcharge for games. So, uh,
Can I just quickly correct you?
yeah,
I
please.
I think is this not a new one? The one you're thinking about is the one from before that was in America, whereas this one's in the UK.
Oh,
The one from
okay.
before,
Okay. I
Gabe had
stand
to fly
corrected.
over to America, to the USA, sorry, because the team behind Overgrowth, can't remember their name, they were suing them for
Yes.
anti who what's it practices. This is a different new lawsuit in the UK,
Oh, man.
essentially like a class action, but not necessarily that, where you just are or would automatically in it by having been a customer of Steam. This is a new UK only, specifically in the UK, uh, uh lawsuit that alleges that Steam's the quote here is Steam's dominance in the PC gaming marketplace to shut out competition and overcharge for games, claiming that people in the UK have been overcharged by
Up to
there was a number.
30%.
Yes, yes, yes. Which is I mean it's not something I'd ever noticed personally. But I understand what they're saying. They are saying that just by creating a monopoly and making their you know that dominant platform be the platform that has to have price parity with everywhere. You're pricing other places out the market, which in the UK, as we've said on this show before, you can go to a shop when the game comes out physically. You can go to I don't know, you can go online. You used to be able to go on play.com. You can go on the game collection. You can go down to game. You can go to Tesco's and get these games for varying different prices, not just the MSRP. Whereas you cannot do that with Steam because it's one
And
marketplace.
that is one of the things that I guess this is probably why I got my wires crossed, right? It's like that one of the things that they brought up in that overgrowth lawsuit in the States was is some of the same points that are being hinged on here, right? Which is
Yes,
that
exactly.
the three key points that they've identified is that Valve imposes price parity obligation clauses on developers, preventing them from offering lower prices on other platforms. That was like the primary complaint of the
Hmm.
overgrowth lawsuit. That all add-on content for games purchased on Steam must also be purchased through Steam, a practice known as tying, and that the cut it takes on all sales through Steam's the aforementioned excessive commission has resulted in excessive pricing on games.
Yep. Yeah, it's all basically the same thing. I think maybe I don't know how related they are. It could be that this one was happening in the US, and now Vicky Shotbolt is the name of the person filing the legal action, the claim.
Yeah, so I
Um,
mean, basically what they're alleging, right, is that like that 30% commission that we know that Valve takes, right, is like leading to inflated prices for
mhm.
gamers in the UK, and that obviously it's anti-competition, all that stuff. Um
Yes.
yeah, so I
I'm
mean,
not going to try and pretend that I understand um, uh, like the all of the laws in the UK surrounding this, as to why this would be different in the US, and also hear why it might be different in Scotland because there's sort of you get more of a compensation in Scotland. It's not like it's not like we've been scammed hundreds and hundreds of pounds. I think it's just as long as you've been as long as you've paid for PC video games or add-on game content through Steam in the last 5 years, sorry, 6 years, you're eligible for up to £44 compensation. So that is that, there's a lot of people. It's like 14 million gamers, so that does work out to a lot of money. But each gamer is only sort of, let's say you've been buying games constantly for the last 6 years. It's only £44, which is, that's a game on Steam. I'm not going to say that's not a substantial amount of money, but it's not like they're trying to sort of shut Valve down. I think it's probably more of a message than anything else of like, come on, let's open up now.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, right, it is one of those things where, class action lawsuits like this are they're money makers, right? So,
Mhm,
like, you called out, Vicky Shotbolt is the person who's like launched the claim, and they've got the
mhm,
support of Milberg London LLP. So yeah, for like a lot of these kind of things, like it will be like a lawsuit season opportunity to make some money, right? And to
mhm,
like let's get a payday. All these people who have been overcharged, will get an opportunity to you know get their cut, and that'll be that, right? It's it's
mhm.
it's it's not something that I think is anything that like Valve significantly needs to worry about, but it is interesting now that right we've had multiple lawsuits in the last couple years about this same kind of anti-competitive practice.
Yeah,
And it
and
it
I understand it. Like, I guess maybe it's not as egregious as PlayStation, where like there is one PlayStation store and that is that. Whereas on PC is supposed to be more of an open platform. It just so happens that Steam got in there first, did it best, and is now sort of like holding on to that victory and not letting anyone else really take a lead. Or
I think I think that's why it is a little bit more complicated or like morally
Mhm,
dubious, right? Is that like to your point about like PlayStation or like Nintendo or Xbox, right? Like I think it is easier to like buy the idea that you have a walled garden when like I bought a proprietary piece of hardware, and it's like you kind of buy it with the understanding that you're going to get your stuff from that store, right? And that if you
mhm,
wanna, if you want the option to shop around, then you buy physical and you wait for a sale, or you go to GameStop and you trade stuff in, right? Like you
mhm,
have alternatives, maybe not digitally, but like even that, right? Like, up until recently, every one of the major platform holders, you could also buy codes for games from third parties, right? And like that's obviously changed in certain regards, but um that was an option you had as well, right? So it's like, you know, I think it was limited, but it was limited in a way that, like, felt, like something that you were kind of accepting when you bought into the ecosystem. Whereas, like, I do think, that expectation for PC is that, like, yeah, you use Steam because it's the best, right? It's become de facto because it provides the best service, not because they're strong arming developers into price parity and things like that, right? Like,
yes, yeah, yeah, but I wonder how much of it being the best comes down to sort of like, because it's the most popular. It is the best, I agree with that, but it is also the most popular. And then if you want to, as a developer or a publisher, want to try and branch out and try new things, you're really sort of like, unless you take a deal with Epic and therefore aren't on Steam at all, you really sacrifice that wedge of marketing and just being available on Steam.
And I think right, like to the point we've talked about a lot in the past, right? Like, I mean, most Steam players like don't like Epic and like have a problem with the Epic Game Store, um, for a multitude of reasons, right? Either in principle because they don't want to split their library among multiple launchers, or because the experience has been bad for most of its existence, right? Like it's
Mhm,
just not. It doesn't offer the same feature set as Steam, right? And I think for all the, free games that they've given out and time that they've spent trying to, entrench themselves and become like a de facto number 2. I mean, they still have a fraction of that market share. So even if you
yeah.
do take that other option to be like, I'll go with the other guy and take the payday or whatever, like your game's gonna suffer, right? Its visibility is gonna suffer. And that is something that I think you can't really afford, to ignore. And I think even on the console side of things, right? Like maybe you have like a bad experience with like PlayStation or whatever, but like you could still go release on Nintendo, you could still release on Xbox. Like you have other options to get in front of console players, right? Whereas like if you want to get in front of PC players, like Steam is that's it. Like
Yeah, if you
that's what you got to do.
no matter what way you interact with PC gaming, with you built a PC, you've bought a PC handheld, you bought a pre-built PC, you've got a little mini PC that acts as a console. No matter what way you do it, you are going to interact with Steam in some way. There's just it's almost impossible to avoid because if you've got look for a game and if you're not getting a direct like it's not a GOG and you can get the installer or
Or like
let's say you
games that
use
like have a direct launcher, like something like League of Legends or,
yeah, yeah, you
like
can just download from their website. Like, generally you're clicking on a game, a link on a game that takes you to a Steam page, or you're buying a code from somewhere that has to be, activated through Steam. So it's impossible to avoid it. Like, that is clearly where they're coming from. And there I'm not saying this in a way of saying like, isn't Steam shit? Isn't it shit they're doing this? No, I'm not anti-Steam because it is convenient and it is, it's the place it is now because it's popular. But but yeah, I do think that they have to also realize that because they are the top dog and they can probably let other, if a smaller developer wants to try something else and sort of lower price somewhere else, they shouldn't be so against it maybe.
yeah, I think what rubs me the wrong way about it is just, I think we often want to look at Valve as being, less predatory and less corporate than their competitors, right? Because they're more non-traditional and they have this flat corporate structure and they do experimental weird things like the Steam Deck and like, you know, um, I want to look at them in that positive light and like as much as there can be good guys in the world of business, right? Like you want to look at them that way, and I think that there's a reason that they have a dedicated vocal fan base that like supports what they do. So yeah, to see them kind of like leveraging that power against smaller teams, it's just a bad look. It leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And,
Mm.
I think it to your point, like I don't think it's something that like um leaves me here being like, "Oh, like, like clutching my pearls. I can't believe they did that." But it's more like,
Mhm.
"Oh, damn, like I wanted to believe you were better than that." I wanted to believe that you
Yeah.
were you were a little more elevated than that in the way that you did business, right? And that,
Yeah.
we
Something you just
believed in a free open platform, and that's not very free and open, right?
yeah. It's something you're not aware of until it's pointed out to you either, I guess. And this probably, points it out, I wouldn't have been aware of these sort of things if it wasn't for these 2 lawsuits. So I would never
Sure.
have put 2 and 2 together. Um,
It's also, like,
but
very funny to have them do this when it's like, "Bro, you're so on top, like, you're so on top. Do you
mm,
need to" like, I don't know that you need to stick your boot on people's neck when you already have, like, a 90% market share, right? Like,
yeah,
it's crazy. It feels, like,
yeah,
very,
but
like, draconian in the way that, like, Nintendo was post video game crash with, like, the seal of quality where they're like, "We run
mhm.
this fucking business." Like,
Yeah, yeah.
like, that's
I
it.
guess once you set the once you let someone do something, you set a precedent, all of a sudden everyone's doing it, right? So I
Yeah,
guess you need to
totally.
have some control, but there's, um, hopefully these sort of these 2, lawsuits will sort of change things up a little bit. If you're in the UK and you are interested in getting involved, you don't actually have to do anything. Just keep an eye on it when it's done. It's not like a class action. Am I right in the US, if it's a class action, you have to give your own you're almost like a signature and you say, "I'm
Yeah,
involved
you
in
have to
this."
claim it.
Yes, whereas in the UK, after the fact, they say, you might have seen before PPR loans or, have you worked in a, um, have you worked in an industry where you've had a job where you've had a uniform and you've cleaned that uniform? Hey, you could get money back for that. It's that sort of thing where after the fact you can just go on and say, "This is who I am. I bought this game here. Blah blah blah." Claim your money, and let's see where this goes, and let's see if it makes any meaningful change for our beloved Steam.
Well, there you go. So we're going to talk about what could also be a potential change for our beloved Steam, which is if Xbox and the rumors that they are working on their own handheld were to come out as a competitor to the Steam Deck, could we finally see a suitable competitor that could, perhaps dethrone the likes of Ionio and some of the other folks that have taken shots at the crown. But before we do that, let me remind you that this episode of the Steam Deck podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of June. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, aka Sobi, Snackago, Steve Stompy, Susan Likes Cats and also Boobies, Ty the Dude, Voodoo Vic, and Waka Hula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/flipscreengames. Y'all the realest of the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. Remember, if you want to show your support just like they did, you can head over to flipscreen.games where you can find links to our Patreon, our sister shows, Nintendo Noise, and the Flipscreen Games podcast, and oh so much more. However you choose to get involved or show your support, make sure you go over there and click on some stuff. It helps us out quite a bit, and it won't cost you a pretty penny unless you want to go above and beyond and get some perks and goodies over on Patreon, which of course we greatly appreciate. Let's get back into it. So this is a story we teased on the Flip Screen Games
Mhm.
podcast this past week. We ended up talking about the Ubisoft presentation longer than I expected. So we decided to save this one for this here Steam Deck podcast because I think it's an interesting one, right? We've talked a lot about competitors on this show. Just what, last week or 2 weeks ago, we were talking about the Zotac
That was last week, yeah, the
last night.
Zotac one.
Yeah, and it feels like every week there's a new one of these handheld PCs that's kind of throwing its hat in the ring, and almost all of them are Windows based, right? Like that's pretty much been the biggest differentiator between them and the Steam Deck. So the idea that Xbox could have their own handheld that maybe is more like a hybrid PC situation that takes advantage of the Windows connection, that takes advantage of some of the you know, Xbox integration we've seen with Windows over the last few years is something that people have been talking about for a long time. And we got plenty of rumors about it in the last few weeks. And then we finally got, um, I wouldn't say confirmation,
We got
but
I would say we got something from the horse's mouth,
it's
which I think
concrete,
is
right?
no better than yeah, you couldn't ask for much more without an official announcement, really, could you?
Exactly. So here's what happened, right? IGN was doing one of their like IGN live presentations during Summer Game Fest. We had Ryan McCaffrey, one of their Xbox reporters for forever, talking with Phil Spencer, and he is kind of talking about the last few years of Xbox and their kind of approach to evolving what the Xbox brand means and their approach to like trying to um get to where players are at, right? And he straight up asks him right about the handheld console of it all, right? And this idea that they have this mantra of like going where the players are, whether that's in the cloud, whether that's on console. And Phil Spencer like cuts him off and goes, so we should have a handheld. I think we should have a handheld too, right? And he gives him this opportunity to respond to that. Like, do you want to speak to specifics about that? Of course, he says no. But what he did say, I think is pretty interesting, right? He says, like, I don't want to say anything. You have to have Sarah Bond on, right? But the future for us in hardware is pretty awesome. The work that our team are doing in different form factors, different ways to play, I'm incredibly excited about it. And uh, there's a little bit of kind of like interplay there afterwards too, right? Where he says like today was about games, but there will be a time to come out and talk more about platform. And then McCaffrey pushes him a little bit further, right? And he says hypothetically, if Microsoft did an Xbox gaming handheld PC device, would it be a Steam Deck like dedicated piece of hardware that I can play offline, or would it be something I would need a Wi-Fi connection to stream from, like similar to like the PlayStation Portal, for example?
Mhm.
And he specifically calls out how much he likes the ROG Ally, how much he likes the Steam Deck. And he says, I think being able to play games locally is really important. So, in that little exchange, I think, there's a lot there that it's
A
not
lot.
committal, right? Like, we don't have anything to take to the bank yet. But to your point, I think this is as much confirmation as you can get without a reveal and an idea of what the device looks like, right? That it's
Mhm.
a handheld PC potentially, right? Of some sort that has that kind of hybrid console PC nature that it is a dedicated device that allows you to play games locally, that it is potentially similar to an ROG Ally, a Steam Deck. Um, what do you think about that, Max?
I think it shows that they're not just like, "Oh, yeah, we're looking into that." I think the fact that they've been talking, he also says something about, "Oh, we've shown off some bits about the ninth generation. We're working on more." Sarah Bond said during that section of the presentation, she said about how we're working
We're
hard
hard
on
at
the
work
next
on what's
generation,
next.
which I think handhelds, hybrids, whatever are, part of the future of gaming. The Steam Deck's proved it. So the Switch proved it. The Steam Deck's proved it. It's here to stay. And if Xbox can do it and do it right, and they, like exactly like they said, playing anywhere, we go where the players are. The fact they're putting their games on PlayStation says a lot to that. That they just want they don't care about selling a box necessarily. They care about selling you games and subscriptions,
And
basically. I think.
services, right?
And services, yeah. And if they can put out a system that does that, then that's great. I wonder if it's gonna be a handheld PC or if they're gonna make a handheld Xbox, which I think is a slightly different thing, and whether that is, you can have your Game Pass like a Series S. I think we said this before about turning a Series S into a handheld, having the Xbox OS, having you have Game Pass on there, download the games to it like digitally only, as opposed to having a PC, I think makes more sense to me just because, it means they don't have to they can control the experience more, they can control the user experience. You're not then going to Steam to buy your games, you're getting your Steam games from the Microsoft Store, you're having Game Pass on there. Um,
Yeah.
I think that I think is the way they go with it personally.
Yeah, I mean, that makes more sense to me when I think about, I guess, just how I envision selling hardware making the most sense for them, right? That it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, we're selling you an Xbox handheld, but at the end of the day, again, it's a means to an end, right? It's another screen for you to play Xbox games on. And I don't know, it's interesting to me because I think if you end up like, the idea of taking a Series S and just putting that in a handheld is interesting to me because then, like, theoretically, you have parity between all their devices, right? Any game that I get on anything I buy with my Xbox account, I can play on my Xbox or on my PC in the cloud, right? Or, like, on my handheld. And I
Mhm.
think that sounds good, but I do think that that's maybe a big uphill battle, right? Like getting that level of power in a handheld at an affordable price point is challenging unless
I
they
agree.
go in with the mentality of like, well, it's going to be expensive and it's going to be more niche, which is potentially, like that's like the Steam Deck model, right? Is like, that thing's very expensive, it's quite a bit more than a regular console. But it's a high-end device for high-end users, and maybe
Yeah.
they can sell that kind of boutique experience, but, um, I don't know, like, I think the thing that makes me wonder about the handheld PC of it is that, like, we know that there was that like hacking event where they were like playing with a version of handheld Windows. So I wonder if that might not be a thing that like they just are already thinking about doing because of the way
Yes.
that handheld and portable computers are evolving, and that like that's a skew that they want to make sure that they're not ceding ground in. So like why not also tie this into your successful, gaming brand, right? Like
Yes.
I don't
I would
know.
like that. I would like that a lot because, it then means that in the future, all of these other handhelds that come out aren't sort of pretty much immediate write-offs for me. You mentioned Aya Neo, the ROG Ally, the Legion Go, the, Zotac one, all of these ones that have come out, I'm like, "Oh, there's bits in here that I like." However, it still runs Windows, and that's not an experience I like in handheld. I'm sure I reckon if I properly gave it a go, I would get over it pretty quickly, but I just really like that Steam Deck console-ness of it that I can, go into it being a
Which
PC.
is why, like, Steve has, like, made the point before of, like, why don't they make an Xbox, OS or whatever, or, like, if
Mhm.
not an OS because you don't wanna have a second competing OS, like, why not have a evolution of that, like, Xbox Game Bar as, like, a way that you create, like, a gaming layer on, like, if you have a PC that you're mostly using for gaming and you wanna use, like, the Xbox,
Yeah.
interface that is like super light, right? And it's like not running all the background stuff that your regular PC is when you just have Windows open. And instead, it's like lean, mean, focused on games, focused on prioritizing game performance, and like having something like that, that, you that could be when you open up the handheld, it launches in that Xbox game mode. But then if you want to go launch it in PC mode so that you can change something or hack it or do whatever, like that's also an option. Um,
Yeah.
that could make sense, but I don't know. It's interesting because I really think either way makes sense, and like one doesn't necessarily have to like it could be like ostensibly a handheld PC that runs on Windows, and you could still call it an Xbox handheld, right? It's like
You are right, yeah. Well, I can't remember what E3 it was. I think I mentioned this from a show and they never did any research on it after that, where they made a big deal of your Xbox One now runs Windows 10. Your Xbox One UI is Windows 10. We're sort of like moving
I
on to
think that was
Windows
one of those things
10.
that they backed off of once there was the
Okay, all
backlash
right.
on the Xbox One where it was like it's an all-in-one device, and I think they moved away from that.
Okay, right, then I thought that was something they were still doing and they were updating it because I was then thinking like, well, if it's already Windows running, could you not just port
Let
that
me see.
Windows experience onto it? Yeah, do a quick. I've just rolled something off the desk quickly. I'm going to grab that while you look that up.
Okay.
Let's have seconds of silence.
So, yeah, I it definitely looks like that was the conversation around the Xbox One for sure. I'm seeing multiple people saying that like it runs a version of Windows 10 on your Xbox, but
Okay,
I think that is probably, like we said, was mostly like a talking point, and something that they moved away
fell
from.
for it. I fell for it. Can't believe it.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think the thing that's most interesting to me is which tact they end up going down, because I think the idea of them being like, "We're making a handheld video game console that is looked at as, like, a competitor to, say, the Nintendo Switch," right?
Mhm.
Um Almost feels like a harder thing for them to do than being like, "Oh, we're making a handheld PC that's a competitor to, like, the Steam Deck or the ROG Ally," because I think the expectations for that device are different, rather than them being like, "Here's our, like, version of the PlayStation Vita," and then it's like, oh, it's, like, always like, it's always being compared to the far more successful Nintendo console, rather than them being like, "Well, no, this is, like, a new form factor of computer, and it's a collaboration between the hardware side of Microsoft and the software side of Microsoft, and it's us pushing the new handheld PC initiative, and we wanted to have, as much as we love our partnership with the ROG Ally, like we wanted to push our own native experience where you could have a device that's like all about Game Pass, and I don't know, that narrative like almost makes more sense to me, but I think
I
what
think
you're describing makes seems like it's so much easier to market, you know?
you have just made a great point there that I hadn't considered. When I think about all my friends that own Xboxes, same with my friends that own PlayStations, right? They own Xboxes, because they wanna play Xbox games, they wanna have Game Pass, which, not even all of them have Game Pass, they just wanna play their games, right? If you release an Xbox branded handheld, they're expecting an Xbox in their hand, they're not expecting a PC because they probably aren't aware of PC, they probably aren't aware of the Steam Deck, There's a guy who I work with who is an Xbox gamer who when I had my Steam Deck in the office, he came out, he was like, "What is that?" I was like, "It's like a Steam Deck. It's like a handheld PC." He's like, "I don't understand what's Steam." I was like, "Oh well, Steam's this, blah blah blah." I tried to explain it, but he's an Xbox gamer. He plays his Xbox. That's the ecosystem that he's in, um, and it probably is a hard sell for Microsoft to come out and say, "Here's a handheld PC," because you are going to instantly get. You're not going to get comparisons from the wider just Xbox console audience to the Steam Deck and other handheld PCs with the ROG Ally. Who's that? What the hell's an ROG Ally? You're going to get comparisons to Nintendo Switch. Oh, I know the Switch. I've got a Switch. My girlfriend's got a Switch. My cousin's got a Switch. My you know nephew's got a Switch. All these people have Switch. I know what that is. So you're immediately inviting that comparison. And if it's not that, if it's just going to be a handheld PC in some way, then surely you're right, that's hard to market,
Or
right?
again, like if it is like, oh, this is gonna be a premium device, so it costs $600 or something, and it's like, oh, it costs twice as much as a Switch. What can I even play on
Yeah,
it? You know, and
yeah.
it
You're like,
becomes
"Oh, I've already got an Xbox, why do I need this?" When it's like, "Oh, well, hang on, but what you're not seeing is all of this, stuff."
yeah.
And yeah,
Well, I
they've
don't
got an
know.
uphill battle with that then.
It's like yeah, and it's like, does it then become this thing where it's like, okay, every time a new Xbox game comes out, do I know it's gonna be on my Xbox handheld day and date? Or is it one of those things of like, now every time they release a game, they have to be like, here's the new Halo, it's coming out on the Xbox Series 2, but not is
Mhm.
it on the hand no, it's not on the handheld. Okay,
Mm.
here's our next game, I'm trying to think of something smaller. Psychonauts 3, that's gonna be on the Xbox Series 2, the Xbox Series family of consoles, and the Xbox handheld, and it's like, okay, like, does that become a marketing problem? I don't know,
Mm.
maybe I'm overcomplicating that as overstating that as a problem, right? Because it's like when a new game comes out on PC, you have that, it's like, well, can my PC run it? Right. And it's like,
Yeah.
but again, it's like, I think when you have the console side of it, there becomes that like,
You
you have
should
an
be able to just
expectation.
yeah, that is on there. Like, and also I think when you start factoring in the different Game Passes as well, is there gonna be, "Oh, you have Game Pass PC, you have Game Pass console, do you have Game Pass, remote, Game Pass handheld?"
Yeah.
You need to have Game Pass Ultimate. It's like the Call of Duty thing. In order to have, like, the full Call of Duty, you have to make sure that you have the right kind of Game Pass. Because if you have just Game Pass for your console, you're missing out on stuff.
Or do
Get
you
on
feel like
PC.
burned because you're paying for full Game Pass, but you can't play all those games on your handheld?
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, I mean, I that's a pretty extreme example I'm giving there of, like, them making another handheld, but it's not as cut and dry as it's already not as simple as you have this, you get game.
Right.
Um, it's in very niche cases, of course. I'm not saying, like, there's a constant confusion. It's not like the PS Plus collection where it's like, "Oh, yeah, we've released these PS2 games, however," "Oh, yeah, you can stream these games, but only if you're paying for this specific thing." It's not that complicated. But there are some questions there that
Yeah.
would need to be answered.
I think it's not a simple problem for sure, but
Mhm,
I do think it's interesting because I think one of the things that we always talk about with these competitors to the Steam Deck and like why I feel like they ultimately just don't feel that attractive to me is that like I feel like when all you're doing is selling hardware, there's like an imperative to keep iterating on hardware and not iterate on services and not,
mhm,
have a life cycle as much because you got to get to the next thing and sell more. So, like, the idea of Xbox coming out with a device that's supposed to have, a shelf life of maybe 5 or 6 years and that they're going to support it and iterate on it and, make it a key part of their strategy moving forward is something that, like, I think is potentially interesting, and it could be the first time that you actually see, like, a legitimate alternative to the Steam Deck that you really, really consider unless you're, like, a very niche, type of user where you're, like, a deeper enthusiast, right? Whereas,
mhm.
like, an Xbox branded device that, does just kind of work and like plays whatever, big release comes out on Xbox. I can play it on my
Yeah.
Series X and then I can grab my Xbox handheld and head out on the road to go visit your parents or whatever and keep playing. Like that's the dream. And if they can deliver that, I think that would be, really attractive and like something that
Yeah.
would really set them apart from Sony, you know?
You want as fewer asterisks as possible, whereas I think the PS Portal as a sort of direct console sort of style version of that exists right now has a lot of asterisks, and I think in some ways the Steam Deck also has some asterisks, and what you don't want is to have to look at a chart when you're buying it. I think a good way for Microsoft to approach this, and considering what they're talking about at the moment, this might be what happens is you don't try and add this third thing into your current lineup. When you do a next generation, you're talking about, right, here's the next generation, here's what's going to be involved. Then you introduce here's this generation is not going to be just PC and console and Game Pass. It's going to be this handheld, which is tied into this from the beginning. So when you buy your Xbox, you have an expectation. You already know exactly what it is. There's no like, oh, hang on a minute, but I'm so used to this. It's
Let
this
me
generation is now this.
let
Go
me
on.
ask you this.
Hmm.
What if the rumor about 2026, right? The new hardware. I wonder, could we have a world where a new Xbox comes out, right, in 2026 and it has less of like a true like, next gen leap, but it is more like the difference between the Series X and the Series S. And you create this like sliding scale of like, okay, the real pinnacle peak experience is the Xbox Series Z or whatever, right? And that's the home console. But now we have this handheld that has parity with what was the new console from the last generation. And you create that crossover, right? Of like, in the same way that every game that comes to Xbox, the real modern, version of it is on X, and then the slightly compromised version is on S. But like, basically, they're the same. I wonder if
Yeah, so the
that's not the way
handheld becomes
forward.
the S. The handheld
Yeah,
becomes
where
the
it,
S.
it
Yeah,
occupies that same space, right? Of like,
yeah.
yeah, like if you want 4K, 60 FPS, whatever that kind of experience, that's going to be on your PC or your console that's plugged into a TV. But you can get this, guaranteed kind of half performance on this handheld
The
device that maybe costs the exact same as
well, okay,
your
if it costs the
$500
same,
console, but
that was gonna be my question or my point was, like, if you say that, oh yeah, you have 2 options, the super powerful Xbox Series Z, which costs $350, $450. I'm putting a price on my ass, I don't know how much they cost.
I'd say
Or
500, right?
$500 to say, or if you want the gimped handheld experience, it's $600. You have to price it in a way where you feel like you're still getting a good deal, and I do think matched pricing is good, and I think the PS Portal being advertised as an accessory to your PlayStation is well done in that there's an expectation there that you have to have the PlayStation for it. It's cheaper for that reason. You shouldn't expect to do anything other than do this one thing. Whereas I think if you're gonna release a full-fledged system that is, you're basically expecting or maybe hoping that people buy both, and that's a hard sell, I think.
I think it's either you need to encourage people to buy both, or you need to operate under the assumption that someone could buy the handheld, and that would be the only thing that they have, and that
Yeah,
needs to be good enough, right? That when
yeah.
you're advertising the next Starfield or the next Indiana Jones, like that game is gonna play on that piece of hardware, because otherwise, why am I buying it? Why am I buying into the Xbox
Hmm.
ecosystem to get this less served device that just happens to be portable, right?
So is there a docked experience there then, do you think? Do you think that they do, like, almost like the Series S where it's like you get the system and you get the dock, but when you plug this thing in, you're getting the Series S style
I don't
performance,
know. Like, I
or is
I
that too
guess
complicated?
I guess it's possible, but, like, I feel like it's more likely to me that you lock in a form factor that is as premium as it can be without breaking the bank, and that you just have benchmarks that you right? Like, this device, the games are gonna be locked 1080 30, or, like, they're gonna be, they're gonna hit a certain, uh threshold that you would, like on like right, like if you and I were both playing a new PC game, and you've got a new PC and I've got one that's 5 years old, right? And maybe you're playing it on ultra and I'm playing it on mid or max, right? Or like high, right? And it's like, yeah, like your version looks better and sharper than mine, but we're playing the same game. We're getting the same
Mhm.
experience, right? Like, there are games like, like Fallout 4, right? Which just got its like next gen update that like, it's like it's ostensibly the same game it was 10 years ago, but now it's supposed to look better, but actually they just messed up the lighting. Um, so you
It's
know what I
quite
mean
hard I
though?
think it's quite hard to pitch that to the same people. I'm not saying this is like an inherent thing with owning an Xbox or anything like that, but these are the people who learned the word teraflops from a presentation at E3 and then used the word teraflops without really understanding what it meant because bigger is better, yada yada yada. Like teraflops, who's ever used teraflops before until the Series X, where sorry, One X came out and they were like, "Oh, this is actually like 9 teraflops," and all of a sudden everyone's like, "Oh, this has got more teraflops than the PlayStation 4 does, so
Clearly
therefore
that's important.
this is the better thing," right? I think if you're I guess, yeah,
How much do people
I
actually
don't know.
care about that though? It's like I think that's
Yeah,
what
I
it's like
guess
it's
I'm thinking
marketing,
about
right? It's like
yeah,
I think people are susceptible in the moment to that. It's like the whole
mhm.
like um, you know, Super Nintendo Genesis thing, like the Mode 7 versus blast processing, right? Which is like neither of them actually like and blast processing didn't exist. And Mode 7 didn't do what they said it did. It sounded cool to say. right? So it's like, okay, like great, like
Mhm.
fine. I not to say that that's what teraflops are. Obviously, it's a real thing, but it's the kind of thing where it's
Yeah.
like if you can't explain what it is, it doesn't matter that it's like you're just buying into the idea that that number's higher, so it's better. Like that means something.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I think to me though, right? If you do sell the idea, because like think about the Series S, right? When that came out, the talking point wasn't, oh, it runs this much worse. It's well, this is the budget version, right? Like you don't care about 4K gaming, if you haven't upgraded to a 4K device yet, this is your way to get into the next generation on the cheap. And I think if the marketing around this device is not how much parity it has with the Xbox and more that you can take your entire Xbox library with you anywhere you go. And you can have that experience, is that seamless experience of being at home, playing Starfield and then grabbing your Xbox, portable and taking it, throwing it in your bag and taking it on your daily commute or going to visit your folks and taking it or going on a road trip and the game can come with you or when you're up in the
Mhm.
air, right on a plane to get your games. You never have to leave your games behind, right? And with the power of Game Pass and cloud saves, like, you will have a seamless drop in, drop out experience. And yeah, you're going to pay extra for that. But that's if you don't care about that, then don't buy it. Or
Yeah.
if you're somebody who doesn't care about console gaming, then don't buy it, right? Like that's not what it's for. And it's
Yeah,
like
it's not for us, I guess it's for Xbox gamers really, or people that want Game Pass
it's like the
on
same
the
thing you
go.
talked about with the Portal, right? Where it's like there was so much backlash when that device came out, but like it also has been sold out basically since it came out.
Yeah.
So it's like clearly it's for somebody. It's just like, are you that person? And if you're not, it sounds dumb. And it's like, why would I buy that? And I
Mhm.
think that similar to the marketing around like the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X, it was very like, well, yeah, if you don't think it's worth it, then don't buy it. Your
Yeah,
launch PS4 is just
just wait
fine.
for the next one. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right? Or like, yeah, if you don't need a portable Xbox, if you don't care about taking your Xbox games on the go, that's fine. Or if you don't want to pay for a dedicated device, guess what? You can use the cloud on your phone or your tablet. That's fine too. But
Mhm.
if you want that premium experience, if you want that ability to play your games natively, if you want that ability to have parity between your devices, well, then you're going to pay extra for it. Right. And it's like, I would personally be comfortable with that. I don't know if that makes sense as a mass consumer product from fucking Microsoft, but who
Yeah.
knows?
I mean, they've made weird shit before, right, Microsoft, but maybe that's when, they're also selling a lot of Windows licenses with it, not when they're Xbox, who currently struggle enough to sell, hardware as it is. If they're then gonna add a third
Right.
niche leg to a product that is already not selling very well because it's just not, because the software is doing well, but the hardware isn't.
And
I'm
and maybe
interested.
maybe to your point, that's why maybe a gimmick like something modular actually does make sense of like, hey, like if you want, you can buy this handheld device and it has starts at this price level, but then if you want a docked experience, you can buy an external
Mhm.
GPU thing and that would be a weird, different dynamic way to push hardware. That could be they're like, hey, we're leaning into a gimmick. We're leaning into doing something different because
Yeah.
selling the same box as PlayStation is not working. Right? We
Yeah.
never caught up. We lost that race. Oh well, right? Like
Yeah.
let's pivot and be weird and be like Nintendo and be on our own timetable and not worry about generations the way that they do and not worry about, this and that. And instead we're gonna push the envelope and try to do something that speaks to our audience or to a new audience, and
Yeah, you do like you could do, the Switch, you lean on that, the opposite of what I said earlier, where you lean on that and you go, the Switch, here's the Switch, but it's your console and it's X times more powerful. And the thing that you like the Switch does, we do that with all the games that you like, not, you're not having to fight for
Mhm.
Nintendo games to play on it.
Or it could
And I
very
think
much
that's
even
a
be like, if you're a real dork, you've heard of the Steam Deck, right? And if you're not, you
yeah.
haven't. And this is like a Switch, but for grown-ups, and it's like,
Yeah, that's yeah.
it's like
Master Chief on the
we
box,
we had
you
that whole
know.
conversation a couple weeks ago, right? Like I forget who it was who wrote in and was like, "How do you describe it to other people?" And I often say that it's like,
Mm,
"Oh, it's like a Switch, but like you can play more games on it. You can play like more mature games on it and stuff like that." It's like, yeah, I mean, like I think that that's a product you could sell to people, right?
I
And
think so.
I think
It's just
Xbox has the resources to do that. It's just a matter of do they do it in a way that ends up connecting, and is it enough that like it can either be a mass market product or that they can be comfortable that it's not. right?
Mhm.
And have expectations set for it. Well, like, this isn't for everybody. This is a premium product. This is a thing we're going to sell to a third of our user base, but they're going to pay premium price for it and they're going to fucking love it. Like,
Yes.
that can be a viable model if you do it right. That was the promise of the PlayStation Portal. It was not something they expected everybody to buy. And as a result, I think it's probably exceeded their expectations, right?
Mhm.
Because they had low expectations for it. But like, is Xbox going to be comfortable having low expectations for a hardware launch? I don't know,
Uh, I mean, I guess there's something they're probably comfortable with now, and they probably have to. But
right?
I do think this is gonna be a part of next gen, and therefore their strategy might just completely change. We might see an Xbox that cares more about selling the box, and therefore they do things like this to get the box in people's houses. Maybe they realize Game Pass. I don't know, but maybe they completely pivot. And Xbox has changed what it does, pretty consistently. It's like, oh, we're doing this. Actually, we're doing this. They're pivoting to keep afloat, stay relevant, keep releasing games, buying things, and doing services, putting things on different places, and it works for them. They're sticking around. It's not all doom and gloom, but I do think this is something we'll see as a part of their next gen, and it sounds like we're going to hear about it in the next couple of years. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah,
Let's
definitely.
see.
We'll see.
Yeah,
Very, very cool, I'll say, to hear about it, right?
yeah,
Regardless of how imminent it is. But
yeah,
also I will say, does feel a little calculated, right? Of like how
yeah,
much bad press Xbox has gotten recently to then be like, here's our killer presentation with all these release dates and all this cool footage, and we're gonna come out and talk about the handheld and talk about like what can we say to get you to talk about anything else, right? But all
yeah,
those studios that we shut down, all those people that we laid off, right?
yeah,
So who knows how close this actually is or whether we'll even ever see it. But
yeah.
I
Feeding the
think
press.
it's definitely an exciting prospect to think what them having that kind of device could mean for handheld PCs as just as a
Hmm.
form factor, right? If Microsoft decides that that's a SKU that they really want to invest in, I think it speaks to the
Yeah.
idea that it's here to stay, right?
The Steam Deck makes it affordable and makes it more mainstream. Other places come in and sort of add that power. If you can get someone like Xbox to come in and make it simple in the way that you literally it is a console, then yeah, that could be good. Because by that point we might be thinking about Steam Deck 2, and that might have something to say about that. They might have Valve might have to up their game a little bit in some way. We'll be on like the fourth ROG Ally by that point, probably the second generation Legion Go and all this stuff as well. So exciting! It's always an exciting time in this emerging market of ours.
That's more conversation about Epic. Anything that could lead to a legitimate competitor for
Mm,
Steam that like makes them have to work a little bit harder for our business and our attention would be obviously just exciting to see, because they've never really
yes.
had a competitor. So they don't really need to push the envelope,
Hmm.
whereas like having somebody else like actively trying to compete with them at what they do best is something that could definitely be exciting for sure.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. Maybe Epic will release their own handheld to be a part of that. You never know.
We'll see.
Speaking of Epic, can I wrap up today's show with a little tidbit that I saw this week?
Please give the PSA.
So, you might have heard of SteamDB. It's a website where you can see stats about Steam games. You get like information about sort of price history. You get information about sales history. Like you see it a lot of the time. Anyway, there's a version of that has now recently come out for Epic Games called Epic Games DB. It basically scrapes the Epic Games Store for data, puts that data in a way that is readable. And then you have access to this information. However, inadvertently, it has uncovered some projects or games or things that are maybe existing only in the background. They're not actually visible to the average user, but the spider that was scraping it has been able to. I assume it's a spider. I don't know how they do these things, but has been able to get this information. So we have a lot of like code names, and people have been able to decipher some of these code names and determine some games that are coming to the Epic Game Store, which is also likely going to mean they are coming to Steam, whether it be now or at some point in the future, after it's been on Epic for a little while. So, just a couple of examples of some of these games. Final Fantasy 16, we sort of already knew was coming to PC, but there's sort of confirmation that's definitely coming to the Epic Game Store. Um, I don't think Final Fantasy 7 remake was exclusive to Epic. I think that might have been on Steam, but Kingdom Hearts was exclusive to Epic, so I wonder if this what that means for this.
Yeah.
Same with there's a Final Fantasy 9 remake, codenamed Momo, um, and there's a starter pack and a sort of a bonus weapon, I think, that are also listed. That's on there. Interestingly, there's a new Turok game that seems to be coming from Saber Interactive. I think it's just called Turok, with Saber Interactive as the publisher. So could that be a leaked game that we don't know about? You know, could possibly be. And also, The Last of Us Part Two. Is also included in this leak as coming to Epic, and that's interesting because we heard recently that there's sort of been a complete version of The Last of Us Part Two ready for PC that's just sort of waiting to be dropped. We had the remaster come out on PlayStation 5 earlier this year. If it's going to come to Epic, there's a good chance it comes to Steam. I don't see that one being exclusive. And
It's
there's a lot of
interesting. I think it's most interesting to me because, during Summer Game Fest, we had that reveal of Lego Horizon Adventures,
Mhm.
which, is getting released day and date on, like, everything, right? Like, I don't know if it's on Xbox, but it's coming to Nintendo Switch, and it's also coming to Steam, but also Epic Game Store day and date, which is the first time PlayStation's ever put a thing out on Epic Game Store, if I'm not mistaken. So the idea that maybe this is gonna come day and date there as well is interesting.
Let me look that up. I'm pretty sure Ghost is on Epic, and I'm pretty sure
Is
Horizon
it?
launched on Epic. I
Okay.
think so. Well, okay, if it's not, it's included in this list, so I could be being oh, yeah, no, it's on the I'm just looking at it now. Horizon Forbidden West, Ghost of Tsushima are both on Epic, so they do release things on Epic. But, none of these have been exclusive, so maybe, that's even more in our favor that, things like Last of Us Part 2 will come out on Steam as well. There's more. The tweet I'm looking at here is a few days old, so people might have deciphered more of them. These are just a few of the sort of big ones. But there's sort of quite a long list of code names. People on Reset Era or Reset Era. I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce that,
Reset Era,
but
I think's right.
Reset Era, yeah, yeah. So I think they've been sort of deciphering things. If you're interested in looking some of this up, um, just sort of look up Epic DB and sort of see what people are saying these games could be, because I think this could be like the old Nvidia leak where there's some things in here that we don't see for a few years or see for a while, but eventually will come to fruition, like with the Ghost of Tsushima, and there was a load of stuff in that leak that came true. Monster Hunter 6, Resident Evil 4 remake, um,
Hmm.
as examples too. So yeah, I think this is going to be another one where we keep hearing news and going, well, that was in the Epic DB leak. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of I don't want to go too much into that, but thought it was worth pointing out before the end of the show.
Yeah, very cool. I'm very interested to see, like, what comes of that Final Fantasy 9 remake and, like, what because 'cause we've been hearing about that a lot for, like, the
Mhm.
last, year or change, and obviously nothing's come of it yet, but, that was always a favorite of mine when I was coming up. That was, like, my first big Final Fantasy as a
Yeah,
kid, so
that
I'd
was the
love
one
to
I
see
watched
that
my
happen.
dad play.
I'm very I really, for some reason, had it in my head that PlayStation did not put these games out on Epic. I'm really surprised to learn that. I don't know why I thought that.
Maybe you should be buying them on Epic.
Mm.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
No, 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 I wouldn't do that.
Buy them on Steam.
I guess it's just based on how infrequently I've ever opened the Epic Game Store.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe I wonder if they were exclusive at one time, like, and I just like assume that they never came over.
maybe.
But I don't know. It's weird. But anyway, well, thanks for the PSA, Max. We'll see how many of these, or not, I guess how many, but when these things come to fruition, because I would imagine you're probably right that it's going to be these will probably all be things that do come to pass
Yes,
based
I
on
think so.
these types of leaks that have come before. So, thank you guys for joining us here in another episode of the Steam Deck Podcast. If you want to write in with your thoughts on any of the stories we discussed today, what do you think about Valve's class action lawsuit in the UK? What do you think about the idea of Microsoft entering the handheld gaming slash handheld PC venue to be a competitor to the Steam Deck? We'd love to hear about your thoughts on that or anything else going on in the world of Steam Deck and PC gaming. So make sure you write in all the ways that you can. Head over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you will find links to all the places we are all over the web, including links to our sister shows, Nintendo Noise and the Flipscreen Games podcast. However you choose to get involved, show your support, or write into the show. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Steam Deck podcast. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Max. We'll see you next week.